U.S. prosecutors have officially indicted former Cuban President Raúl Castro. He and 5 others are now charged in connection with the Cuban military's fatal downing of 2 civilian planes 30 years ago. What you're seeing now is CBS News' actual coverage of that incident back on February 25th of 1996.
Wow.
Now, it's not clear if the 94-year-old Castro will ever stand trial since Cuba does not extradite people to the United States. The Cuban government previously denied any wrongdoing, and Cuba's current president is condemning the indictment as a political stunt. So what does this all really mean? Roxanna Vigil can shed some light on that. She's an international affairs fellow in national security at the Council on Foreign Relations and joins us from Washington. Roxanna, good morning. We've seen in our past hour some Cuban Americans celebrating this, but I'm curious about how people on the island of Cuba are reacting and if they really are buying the U.S. case that this is about this 30-year-old incident, or if it's really about pressure to get the current regime to buckle. What's the local response been?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the response from the government, and I think among the people, they are focused on their day-to-day survival in the worst energy crisis that Cuba has seen ever. The Cuban economy has been in crisis for a while, but this oil embargo imposed by the Trump administration has really sent the humanitarian crisis in Cuba to the next level. And we're seeing the Cuban people struggle day to day on how to overcome that. This latest indictment, I think part of the reaction in Cuba is a sign of further pressure to come, potential sign of a U.S. military operation like what we saw in Venezuela. So I think it's very tense on the island right now.
So, it's been years since Raúl and Fidel Castro were officially in power. Can you just take us back for a minute, remind us what life was like under Castro rule and whether that's changed?
So, like I mentioned, the Cuban economy has been in crisis for a while because it's been highly dependent on other countries. During the Cold War, it depended on the Soviet Union. Once the Soviet Union fell, it turned to Venezuela, which provided Cuba with cheap oil. What happened on January 3rd, after the U.S. intervention in Venezuela that removed Nicolás Maduro, you saw the oil that was flowing to Cuba, about 60% of Cuba's oil, stop. And then you saw the oil blockade come in. So it's created an energy crisis that wasn't there before, but the Cuban economy has been struggling and had been dependent on other countries for a long time.
What is your expectation of what might happen next? I know it's impossible to predict, but based on what you know and what the trend lines are.
I mean, this looks very similar to what we saw in Venezuela. You have a ratcheting up of pressure, starting with, of course, the oil blockade in January. Then you have the CIA director going to visit to deliver messages from the Trump administration. Of course, you have the indictment yesterday, and just yesterday you have an aircraft carrier arrive in the Caribbean Sea. All these are carefully orchestrated moves to increase pressure on the regime as the Trump administration tries to negotiate something. If the negotiations fall apart like they did in the Venezuela case, I think you are more likely than not see some type of military action, and that can take many routes. I would imagine the Trump administration wants a Venezuela model type solution here, which would include finding a Delcy Rodriguez, who's the number 2 of Maduro, the Venezuelan dictator, who would be able to work with the United States. I'm not sure that that person exists in Cuba. It's a totally different regime, totally different situation. If Trump can find someone to work with in Cuba, I think it would be really hard to sell it here in the United States to the Cuban American diaspora that has for a long time said there is no negotiating with the Communist Party in Cuba.
Yeah, and I just wonder, Roxanna, before we let you go, what a successful successor would look like in Cuba. What do Cubans there need?
The Cubans need a government that will listen to them. The Cubans have for a long time been trying to make changes that improve their lives. And they need a government that they can work with and that will listen to them. And ideally, that would include a transition to democracy. That is the best way to be able to have a government that is beholden to the people. And I think eventually the Cuban people will achieve that. It's just a matter of, is it going to be through a violent military intervention from the United States, or is it going to be through supporting the Cuban people to achieve that in some other way?
Yeah, some great insight there. Roxanna Vigil, thank you.